Today is Tuesday, Parashat Tetze. Parashah of this week has many mitzvot in it, 74 mitzvot. We explained some of them yesterday. We'll continue and explain some of the mitzvot that are also in the parashah of this week. One mitzvah is not to charge interest to a fellow Jew on a loan. If you're a partner with him and you invest in his business and you get to share some of the profits, then that would be allowed. However, to charge interest just on a straight loan, that would not be allowed. Another mitzvah of the parashah of this week is when you make a commitment, a vow. Let's say you made a pledge. Lo te'aher leshalemo. When you make a neder, don't delay in paying it. Should pay it as soon as possible. That would include any commitment, and for sure if there is a pledge to a synagogue or a bet midrash or a commitment to someone that you fulfill a certain obligation, do not delay it, do it as soon as possible. And then also, Motzah Sefatecha Tishmor, whatever you commit to, you have to fulfill. Another mitzvah in the parashah of this week is to make sure to pay employees on time. You hire somebody, you agree that you'll pay him, let's say, every Friday, then Friday he should get paid. Don't delay him until the next week. If you hire even a babysitter who expects to be paid when you come back from wherever you went to, then you have to make sure to pay that person work, because that person expects money right there and then. And otherwise, if you delay, then you're transgressing this mitzvah of the parashah of this week. This mitzvah is so important that in a certain situation, it may even supersede a certain aspect associated with Shabbat, and I'll explain. Sometimes in the summer, most places in the summer, because Shabbat comes in very late, we start the prayer of Arvit of Shabbat early, before even it gets dark, before even the sunset. And that's allowed. And what you're adding more to making Shabbat even longer, because you're going to start Shabbat earlier than the whole world, and that's fine. And you prayed already Arvit of Shabbat. You cannot do anything that is not allowed to do for Shabbat, because Shabbat has started for you. But if you realize, after you've already finished the prayer of Leil Shabbat, that you realize that you haven't paid an employee that week, that you owe him the money for that week, you just realize then you would be allowed to make payment, even though making payment on Shabbat is not allowed, and Shabbat has started for you, but that does not supersede the mitzvah of paying employees on time. So these are some of the mitzvot. Lo tachshom shor vedisho. This is another mitzvah. If you have an animal who is threshing on the threshing floor, he's threshing the wheat to separate the husks from the grain, you cannot muzzle him. In other words, he should be allowed to eat from the food that he's working on. And that's the mitzvah of lo tachsom shor bedisho. By the way, somewhat similar to this, if you have people working with food, let's say in the field, picking fruits, they're allowed to eat from the fruits that they're picking, some if they so desire. So these are some of the mitzvot in the parashah of this week, and the parashah of this week tells us also to be very careful with weights and measures. In other words, you have a store and you sell a certain product based on a certain weight. It could be even a gas station. People come and help themselves to put some gas. You have to make sure that your weights and your measures are properly calibrated so that it is exactly, and that you're not chas v'shalom cheating anybody of a certain amount of weight or a certain amount of liquid. And that's a very grave thing to do that, because if you want to do teshuvah, how would you be able to find all the customers that you took advantage of to reimburse them the amount? Almost impossible. In such a situation, a person who wants to do teshuvah, he would evaluate how much he took improperly from people, and he would put it towards community causes. He would donate it to causes that serve the whole community, and therefore the people that he would have cheated get made whole through that service to the community. By the way, it was in Morocco, in the old country, people were selling oil not in bottles that are closed, but people would come to an oil merchant and buy from him oil that he would measure and put into, let's say, whatever pot or vessel they brought. Let's say you take a liter, measure a liter and pour it. However, what happens is there's always, because of the viscosity of the oil, some oil that sticks to the wall of the measuring tool. And therefore you were not complete. So typically they would add a little bit extra just in case there's some. But even with that, the oil merchant would take the vessel and put it upside down into a bucket so that some drips would continue to drip into that bucket, and thinking that maybe some of those drips were drips from that should have been, some of those drops should have been in the container of the person that came to buy oil. And therefore, at the end of every week, he would take that bucket that over the whole week would have accumulated a certain amount of oil and donate it to the synagogue. Especially at the time, many of the synagogues had these big cups with wicks in oil to light up. That was the lighting system in terms of, there was no electricity yet. And even after there was electricity, these big cups were in memory of people who passed away. So that would continue to light up the synagogue. And the oil that that person would have collected in that bucket, he would give it as a donation to serve the community, in order to make sure that he's not taking advantage of anyone, even by mistake he did, not purposefully, inadvertently, and that would go back to serve the community by being used in the local synagogue. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.